Why was everyone pretending not to hear the dying voices coming through the radio? That question hung like a ghost in the air of the operations center, unspoken, but heavy enough to make Rachel Thompson's throat tighten. Static crackled from the speaker, cutting through the stale hum of machines. Somewhere far beyond the wire, men were screaming. The sound didn't belong in a briefing room. It belonged to hell. Ford operating base Leatherneck, this is Bravo Company, we're taking heavy fire. The voice on the radio strained against chaos. Gunfire snapped behind him, short, desperate bursts. We're pinned. Request immediate extract, grid 42 Sierra Whiskey Echo. The transmission drowned under a thunderclap of explosions. Someone screamed. Then only static. No one moved. No one except Rachel. She wasn't supposed to be here for this briefing. At least that's how the others made her feel. She stood at the edge of the room, a small figure in a loose flight suit trying to stay invisible. But she couldn't unhear that voice. She knew those Marines. She'd flown them last week on a supply run, joking kids with dust in their hair and confidence in their eyes. And now that sound. The kind that stripped a person down to something primal. Across the table, Major Bradford turned the radio volume down with casual indifference. The room seemed to exhale, as if silence made the dying easier to ignore. "Not worth the risk," he said, arms folded. His voice carried authority, confidence, the kind born from rank, not empathy. "No one's sending aircraft into that kill box. Those birds cost more than those grunts will make in a lifetime." The laughter that followed was soft, but it still stung like a slap. Rachel's hands balled into fists. She kept them hidden at her sides. Nails dug half-moons into her palms, grounding her fury. The words hit like shrapnel, each one another reminder that she was never really part of them. The guys with swagger, the ones who filled every room they entered. To them, she was the diversity hire. The token pilot who flew supply runs because it was safe. The one who made coffee while real pilots talked tactics. But that wasn't why her pulse was pounding. It was because she knew what was happening out there. She studied that valley, the shape of its ridgelines, the ambush points, the canyon that funneled convoys into death. She warned them about it in the morning briefing. And they'd laughed then, too. A hiss of static snapped her back. "We're taking heavy casualties. Request CAS request." Then silence. The kind that meant something terrible. Bradford finally looked up from his coffee mug. "That's done," he muttered. "We'll mark them as pinned until further notice. Next agenda item." "Sir?" Rachel's voice came out quieter than she meant, but it stopped him mid-sentence. She felt every pair of eyes turn toward her. The weight of them pressed against her chest. Still, she didn't back down. "Sir, they can't fight their way out. The terrain, there's no cover, no egress. If we wait for safe extraction, they'll all die." Bradford blinked, surprised she'd spoken at all. Then he smiled, slow, condescending. "Lieutenant Thompson, you're here because Command wants a female pilot on record. You're not qualified to second-guess combat command decisions." Her face burned, but she stood firm. "With respect, sir, I'm not second-guessing, I'm telling you. They're trapped in a box canyon. I can get to them." Laughter again. A low chuckle from Master Sergeant Willis, 6'2" and built like a tank. "Get to them. You couldn't lift a toolbox yesterday, Thompson." Even Captain Hayes joined in, the other woman in the room, tall, sharp-featured, and painfully perfect. "Maybe she can organize the supply runs while we handle the real work," Hayes said, smirking. "That's more her speed." The room echoed with amusement. Rachel kept her expression blank. Anger would only feed them. Silence was her armor, but inside something cold coiled tight. On the radio, another voice broke through, panicked, ragged. "Contact left, we need immediate extraction. They're everywhere." A different tone crept into the air, now unease. Even the officers who had laughed went still. The tactical screen flickered, showing a cluster of blue dots surrounded by red. The kill box was closing. 340 Marines. Bradford rubbed his temple. Protocol's clear, he said. No extraction into a hot zone with confirmed anti-air. We wait. They won't last an hour, Rachel whispered. Bradford turned on her, voice rising. Those are the rules that keep trained pilots alive. You think I'll risk multi-million-dollar assets because you feel bad? Something in her broke then. Not anger, not pride, just the final splinter of patience. They're not assets, she said quietly. They're people. That earned her a sneer. You're dismissed, Lieutenant. Go make some coffee. The laughter started again, but this time it didn't reach her, because the radio had changed. Command, this is Chaos 33. Lieutenant Colonel Harrison is with us. Repeat, Battalion Commander is trapped with us. Request immediate action. Silence. Bradford froze. Colonel Harrison, Pentagon connections, a senator for a brother. Suddenly, the dead mattered. Get me every bird ready for launch, Bradford barked. Apache, Blackhawks, whatever's flight-worthy. The operations officer checked his roster. Sir, we have nothing available. 2 Blackhawks in maintenance, 1 downrange, 1 damaged. Apache at Kandahar for upgrades. So get me the reserves. All grounded pending parts from Germany. The major's voice cracked into a curse. On the radio, screams bled through the static again. Rachel's chest felt tight enough to break. They were dying while these men argued logistics. Her hand brushed against the device in her pocket, a rugged military-grade smartphone she used for encrypted communication. It buzzed once. A message. Hangar 7 now, E. Rodriguez. Elena. The only one who'd ever treated her like she belonged. Rachel didn't ask permission. She simply turned and walked out. Nobody stopped her. Most didn't even notice. She'd been invisible for so long, it was second nature. The afternoon sun hit her like a slap when she stepped onto the flight line. The horizon shimmered with heat. Blackhawks sat grounded like sleeping giants, engines cold, rotor blades tied down. She passed them, heart hammering, each step heavier than the last. Hangar 7 sat on the far edge of the base, the forgotten place, the graveyard. Inside, dust motes drifted in shafts of light cutting through the gaps in the old corrugated walls. The smell of burnt oil and old hydraulic fluid filled the air. And there, standing by a tarp-covered shape, was Elena. She looked up, wiping sweat from her face, a grin spreading despite the situation. Tell me you're thinking what I think you're thinking. Rachel said nothing. She just walked to the tarp and pulled. The fabric fell away, revealing the faded olive body of a A1 Huey, ancient, patched, beautiful in its decay. The helicopter that had defined another war. Elena whistled softly. She hasn't flown in 5 years. They use her for spare parts and photo ops. Rachel walked around it slowly, hand tracing bullet patches on the fuselage like reading scars. Hydraulics. Barely holding. Avionics prehistoric. She's museum grade at best. Rachel crouched to check a line beneath the fuselage. She'll hold long enough. You're serious, Elena stared. You're talking about stealing a bird and flying into a kill zone with no support. Bradford will court-martial you. You'll lose your wings. 340 Marines, Rachel said simply. They'll lose their lives. That shut her up. Rachel climbed into the cockpit, movements automatic. Her hands found switches, levers, pedals, the controls of her childhood. For a second, she wasn't Lieutenant Thompson, the invisible supply pilot. She was just Rachel, the little girl who sat beside her father in an old civilian Huey while he whispered lessons over the engine noise. Her voice softened. He flew these in Vietnam, taught me everything. Said the Huey never lies, you just have to listen. Elena slid into the co-pilot's seat. You're insane. Rachel's eyes stayed forward. Maybe, help me get her ready. For the next 45 minutes, time disappeared. 2 women against rust and gravity. Elena worked the engine, muttering curses and prayers in equal measure. Rachel checked fuel flow, pressure lines, flight controls, touching each system like a surgeon with a patient on the table. The Huey groaned awake. Old systems hummed, hesitant at first, then steadier. The air inside the hangar vibrated with the faint promise of life. Hydraulics at 1200 psi, Elena reported. Not ideal, but workable. Rachel adjusted a dial. She'll fly at 1100 if I keep her light. We'll load morphine, water, stretchers, whatever we can fit. You know this is suicide. Rachel smiled faintly. Not if I listen. When the radio in her pocket crackled again, both women froze. The same desperate voice. Any station, this is Chaos 33. We're down to 30%. If anyone's listening, we need help, please. Rachel swallowed hard. He's got twin daughters. I met him, showed me their picture. She turned back to Elena. Start her up. Elena hesitated, then nodded. You're out of your damn mind, she said, but her eyes shone with something fierce. I like it. Rachel strapped in, heart pounding. Her fingers moved through the startup sequence like a ritual, switches, breakers, levers. The turbine coughed once, twice, then caught. The hangar filled with the wine of resurrection. Dust exploded upward as the rotors began to spin. Warning lights flared across the dash. Rachel reset them one by one, talking to the machine under her breath. You'll fly, you've done worse. The Huey answered with a rising roar. Elena jumped out, shouting over the wind blast. They'll shoot you down before you clear the line. Then I'll fly lower, Rachel yelled back. Tell them nothing, just keep this between us. At 12:47 hours, Rachel eased the collective. The skids lifted an inch, then another. The Huey trembled, alive again after years of silence. She hovered, testing balance, feeling the torque through her legs. Everything in her body hummed with focus. Godspeed, Elena whispered. Rachel nodded, pushed forward on the cyclic, and the Huey slid out into daylight. The tower's voice exploded over the comms immediately. Unknown aircraft departing Hangar 7, identify yourself. You are not cleared for takeoff. Return to base immediately. She didn't answer. The base shrank behind her, the desert unfolding ahead. Below 50 feet, hugging the terrain. Dust trailed in her wake. Her hands were steady now, movements instinctive, fluid. The radio erupted with desperate transmissions, the symphony of men on the edge. Winchester on ammo. Need immediate CASEVAC. Where's our support? Rachel keyed her mic. Chaos 33, this is Angel Flight. Inbound your position. Pop smoke when you hear rotors. Silence, then disbelief. Angel Flight, who the hell is this? We have no air support authorized. Someone who doesn't care about authorization. Get your wounded ready. I'll be there in 18 minutes. A pause, then the voice came back softer. Lady, if you're real, we'll hold till hell freezes. Rachel smiled through tears she didn't have time to wipe away. Then I'd better be quick. The eastern canyon rose ahead, a jagged wound in the landscape. Dangerous, narrow, unpredictable. Perfect. No one would expect a pilot to come through there. She dropped altitude 30 feet above the ground. The walls closed in, shadows swallowing the helicopter whole. The Huey fought the crosswinds, the air currents twisting like invisible claws, but she adjusted before each hit. It was flying by feel now, not instruments, every muscle reading the machine, every heartbeat syncing to rotor rhythm. Her father's voice whispered in memory, "She'll tell you what's coming if you listen." She listened. A dust devil spun ahead, violent and sudden. She banked left, used its spin to lift instead of crash. The Huey shook but held. Sweat streamed down her temples. Fear was there, of course, it always was, but it had no vote. The radio came alive again, barely holding together under the noise. They're in the rocks flanking us, any air support at all. Rachel pushed the throttle. Hold on, I'm coming. And far behind her, no one in the command center yet realized that the supply pilot they'd ignored, the one they'd mocked, had just taken off into enemy airspace alone. in a museum piece held together by bolts and belief. They would. Soon. Because in 15 minutes, hell was about to meet the quietest pilot in Afghanistan. What does courage sound like? Sometimes it's not a battle cry. Sometimes it's the quiet rhythm of a helicopter engine fighting to stay alive, and the heartbeat of a pilot who refuses to quit. The canyon walls rose on either side like jaws, closing around Rachel as she threaded the Huey through the eastern approach. The old bird complained with every gust, the fuselage creaking, warning lights flickering like nerves. Below her, the earth blurred rocks, dust, shadows, death waiting for the smallest mistake. "Hold together," she whispered, "just a little longer." She was flying 30 feet above the canyon floor, lower than regulation, lower than reason. It was the only way to stay off radar. The air inside the cockpit shimmered with heat and vibration. Sweat slid down her temples, catching grit. Every muscle in her body was tense, yet her hands were calm, controlled. Her father used to say the Huey was like a living thing. It would talk to you if you listened closely enough. And right now it was whispering back, "I can still do this." The canyon opened without warning, light spilled in, and with its sound. Gunfire. The staccato roar of machine guns, echoing through the valley like thunder rolling over metal. Smoke rose from the valley floor, black columns, flames licking the skeletons of vehicles that had once been whole. 340 Marines, or what was left of them, were pinned in the center, surrounded by enemy positions on the ridgelines. It was worse than the map had shown. Much worse. Her radio exploded with overlapping voices. "They've breached the south line. Need medic RPGs on the ridge." Another voice cut through, familiar. "Chaos 33, this is Sergeant Thompson. We're still holding, but barely. Whoever you are, you better be real because we're out of miracles." Rachel keyed the mic steady. "Angel flight inbound, visual in 2 mics. Pop smoke when you hear me." No one answered, but seconds later, a streak of purple smoke bloomed below, a signal in the chaos. She saw the RPG team on the north ridge just as they saw her. 2 men kneeling, launchers rising. She didn't hesitate. She banked hard left, dropping the Huey's nose, diving straight into the valley floor. The first rocket hissed overhead, a comet of fire. The second detonated against the cliff behind her, sending shrapnel hammering into the airframe. Metal pinged and whined. A few fragments punched through the side panels, one grazing her shoulder. Pain flared. She ignored it. "Stay with me," she breathed to the helicopter, adjusting the cyclic, easing the collective. The skids brushed dust. She was that low. When the Huey broke through the smoke, the Marines saw her, a green ghost from another war. A sound most of them had only heard in documentaries. The whump-whump-whump of rotor blades that once meant salvation in Vietnam. And now in this hellhole, it meant hope again. Staff Sergeant Thompson appeared through the haze, waving. His face streaked with soot and blood, uniform torn. He blinked, disbelief etched into his features as the Huey flared and landed in a swirl of dust and smoke right inside the perimeter. "Move, move," he screamed to his men. "Get the wounded first." Rachel kept her hands locked on the controls, eyes scanning the ridgelines. Machine gun fire sparked off rocks around them. Tracers streaked past the cockpit like molten arrows. Each second on the ground was a lifetime. 8 max, she shouted over the radio, 10 if they can walk. Marines carried bodies, some limp, some screaming, loading them into the cargo bay. The Huey rocked under the shifting weight. Alina's hasty patchwork was holding, but barely. Hydraulic pressure danced just above failure. "10's in," Sergeant Thompson yelled, slapping the side. "Go." Rachel didn't wait. She pulled pitch. The Huey groaned, skids grinding against the dirt before finally breaking free. The overloaded bird wobbled, climbing sluggishly. RPG trails streaked the sky again. The first exploded close enough to make her teeth rattle. She kept climbing, coaxing the machine upward with gentle inputs, nursing power she didn't have. Come on, come on. The engine temperature climbed into the yellow. The transmission warning flickered, but the Huey rose, clawing into the hot Afghan sky. At 300 feet, she nosed forward, trading altitude for airspeed. The valley dropped away behind her, replaced by endless desert. The radio hissed again. Angel Flight, this is Chaos 33. Confirm you're airborne. 10 souls on board, Rachel replied. Returning to base, I'll be back. Ma'am, you're bleeding. She looked down. Her sleeve was soaked red from shrapnel, but the pain felt distant, unimportant. Just keep pressure on your own wounds, Corporal. I've got us. The flight back took 12 minutes. 12 long minutes of wind and static and the metallic smell of blood. The Marines in the back were quiet except for groans and the rhythmic rattle of stretchers against the deck. Rachel could feel their fear and something else underneath. Relief. The kind that breaks you open from the inside. Angel Flight, identify yourself. The tower's voice snapped through her headset, hard and bureaucratic. You are not cleared to land on the medical pad. Divert to security holding area immediately. She ignored it. The base came into view, a cluster of metal and sand under the burning sun. She angled straight for the field hospital. Medics were already running, alerted by someone who'd overheard the emergency frequency. The Huey hit the ground hard. Skids bit, frames shuddering. Before the rotors even slowed, medics were inside, pulling the wounded out. One Marine, barely older than a teenager, grabbed Rachel's sleeve as they lifted him. Ma'am, he whispered through blood-crusted lips, we thought we were dead. Her voice caught, not today. A security team was sprinting across the tarmac, rifles slung, faces tense. Rachel didn't wait for confrontation. The moment the last Marine was clear, she lifted off again, throwing dust into their faces. The radio erupted. Angel Flight, return to base immediately or you will be fired upon. She switched frequencies. Chaos 33, Angel Flight returning. ETA 18 minutes. Get your next load ready. Copy that, Angel Flight, Thompson's voice answered, rough but alive. We'll hold. She flew lower this time, 20 feet above the ground, using terrain as her armor. The old Huey rattled, but the controls still answered, sluggish but steady. Her left arm was starting to stiffen from the wound. She flexed her fingers, kept going. In the command center, alarms had started. Officers scrambled, demanding answers. Bradford stood red-faced, shouting, "Who authorized that takeoff? Identify that pilot." But Colonel Mitchell, the new operations overseer who just arrived from Kandahar that morning, said nothing. He watched the radar feed quietly. "That's not just any pilot," he murmured. No one understood what he meant yet. Out there in the canyon, Rachel was running the same gauntlet again. Only now, the enemy was waiting. Machine gun fire erupted from a ridge that had been silent before. Bullets pinged against the airframe, ripping holes in the cargo bay. The Huey shuddered violently. Hydraulic pressure dropped again, 1100, 1050, 950 psi. "Come on, old girl," Rachel whispered. "Stay with me." She banked hard, hugging the canyon wall so close she could see her own reflection in the rock, a flash of green metal and blurred rotors. The air smelled of smoke and cordite. Her wounded arm burned every time she moved the cyclic, but pain meant she was still alive. When the valley opened up again, she saw purple smoke waiting and men waving, smaller now, fewer. Too few. Chaos 33, this is Angel Flight. Visual on you. Copy, LZ Hot, Northridge still active. You're gonna take fire. Understood. She didn't flinch. Didn't slow. Just dropped in like gravity, had a personal grudge. The Huey slammed down hard, kicking up dust and debris. Marines ran through smoke, carrying the wounded. Gunfire hammered the ground around them. Tracers sliced the air. One struck the tail boom, a metallic scream echoed through the cabin. The aircraft jerked. Warning lights bloomed across the dash. Hydraulic pressure hit red. Hydraulics failing, Rachel muttered. She grabbed the manual override, compensating with raw muscle. The controls turned heavy, stubborn. Her arm trembled with effort. A Marine yelled through the open door. "That's 12, ma'am. We're full." "Hold tight." She pulled pitch again. The Huey fought her like a wild animal, heavy and wounded. It climbed, sluggish but obedient. As they cleared the canyon rim, an RPG exploded 50 meters off the nose. The shockwave hit like a hammer, slamming them sideways. One of the door gunners opened fire with his rifle, returning bursts into the ridgeline until the magazine clicked empty. Rachel leveled out, breathing hard. "Everyone's still with me." A weak chorus of yesies. One voice said, "We owe you a beer, ma'am." She almost laughed, almost. Halfway back to base, a hydraulic warning tone began, the kind that never stopped until something broke. The cyclic started to drift right. She countered with pressure, her forearm burning. Every mile home felt like a year, but she made it, somehow. When the base came into view again, the tower didn't even bother with warnings this time. They knew who she was now. They just didn't understand why she was doing it. She landed on the medical pad, engine screaming, smoke trailing from the tail boom. As the rotor slowed, a staff sergeant climbed to the cockpit. "Ma'am," he said, eyes wide, "you're hit." Rachel's lips twitched, not enough to stop. "You can't go back up there in this." But she already had her hand on the throttle. "Tell command I'll need more morphine packs and field dressings." "Lieutenant." The engine rose again, drowning his protest. The Huey lifted once more into the fatting light. She was flying on instinct now, on anger, on something deeper than orders or reason. Fear can't live where purpose does, her father used to say. And purpose was all she had left. Back in the command center, Colonel Mitchell leaned closer to the screen as the feed from a surveillance drone came online. The image was grainy but clear enough to see. A single helicopter, its frame scarred, rotors uneven, flying through tracer fire as if the devil himself couldn't bring it down. "Pull her record," he told an aide. "Name's Thompson, Rachel." The aide frowned. "Sir, she's logistics." "Do it." The colonel watched the Huey bank through another wave of tracers, smooth as poetry, and whispered to himself, "That's no logistics pilot." Out in the valley, Rachel approached again. Third run, same route, same impossible odds. But something had changed. The Marines below were fighting harder now. The sound of her rotors brought something back into them. Hope. And hope was dangerous. She touched down under fire again, bullets sparking across the hull. More wounded loaded. More lives pulled from the edge. Each takeoff slower, heavier, harder to believe. When she landed the third load at the hospital pad, her left hand was trembling uncontrollably. Elena ran toward her, grease-stained and breathless. "You're bleeding out, Rachel. You can't keep this up." Rachel looked at her, eyes bright and fierce. "Tell that to them." Elena's voice cracked. "You'll die." Rachel gave a small, tired smile. "Then I'll die doing something that mattered." She throttled up again, the Huey's ancient engine screaming defiance. And as she lifted into the dusk, her shadow stretched long across the desert, small, fragile but unbroken. The base quieted. Even those who'd mocked her stood at the windows now, watching. Not because they believed she'd make it back, but because a part of them needed to believe someone like her could. The rotors faded into the distance. And for the first time that day, Major Bradford didn't have anything to say. How many times can a person touch death before it starts touching back? The third flight had drained her. Her left arm burned from shrapnel, fingers stiff, blood soaked into the fabric of her flight suit. The Huey rattled like an exhausted animal, every vibration, every metallic groan, a reminder that both pilot and machine were bleeding out. But Rachel didn't stop. Below her, the desert blurred into copper and shadow. The sun had dipped lower, spilling long orange light through the canyons. The world felt both infinite and suffocating. The radio on her dash buzzed faintly with desperate voices still fighting to stay alive. Chaos 33, this is Angel Flight. ETA 14 minutes, she said. Static hissed back. Then a strained voice answered, copy Angel Flight, we're holding but barely. North Ridge is still hot. Rachel adjusted course, tracing the terrain with precision born of obsession. She'd memorized every line of this valley, every gust pattern, every updraft, every dead zone the wind ignored. It wasn't calculation anymore. It was instinct. In the command center, they watched her progress on the screen, one flickering dot moving across a digital map. Colonel Mitchell stood motionless, eyes narrowed. The other officers murmured around him. No one knew what to say. The air was heavy with something they couldn't name, shame, awe, fear, maybe all three. Major Bradford finally broke the silence. She's violating every rule in the book. You can't let this stand, sir. She's stolen government property. Government property? Mitchell's voice was calm, almost quiet. She's flying a 50-year-old helicopter into enemy fire to save Marines your protocol abandoned. Bradford flushed, jaw tightening. You can't reward insubordination. Mitchell cut him off without looking away from the screen. Tell me, Major, how many men did you save today? Bradford didn't answer. Because everyone already knew. On the drone feed, they watched as the Huey entered the eastern canyon again. The narrow walls swallowed her up, then spit her out into chaos. Tracers rose like fireflies of death, weaving through smoke. The camera zoomed. The bird looked crippled, battered, uneven, but it was still flying. Mitchell leaned forward, whispering to himself, I've seen that maneuver before. Sir, the intelligence officer asked. Cross-reference all female aviators with advanced low-altitude certifications. And check 160th SOAR training archives from 2019. The officer blinked. Sir, there were no female graduates. Do it anyway. While command scrambled for answers, Rachel's world had narrowed to sound and instinct. The whump-whump of the rotors. The hiss of wind through cracked panels. The deep throb of her pulse. She saw the valley ahead, a black scar dotted with muzzle flashes. Purple smoke again, closer to the canyon mouth this time. The Marines were running out of room. Chaos 33, I've got visual, she said. Copy Angel Flight. Ridge fire north and east. We've got wounded in both sectors, if you can land between. Not if, Rachel said quietly, when. She dropped fast, too fast. The altimeter screamed. The Huey shook, warning lights blinking red across the board. She ignored them all. At 50 feet, the first RPG whooshed past. At 30, the second. At 10, the Huey slammed down hard. The shock jarred her teeth, but she held the controls steady. Go, go, go! Sergeant Thompson's voice cut through the dust as Marines rushed the bird, dragging wounded bodies, covering each other with rifle fire. The tail rotor whined as bullets punched through the skin of the fuselage. Rachel didn't look back. She couldn't afford to. 10 seconds, she shouted. Half full, someone yelled back. 5 seconds. 2 more coming. Load them or leave them, Rachel yelled, voice cracking. The decision stabbed her like a blade, but she couldn't risk staying longer. Last man in. Rachel pulled pitch. The Huey staggered upward, slow and heavy. Tracers chased them, glowing green serpents in the air. Then impact. A sharp clang from beneath her seat. Warning lights flared red again. Hydraulic pressure critical, she muttered. Damn it. The cyclic grew stiff, resisting her touch. She leaned into it, using her full weight to hold control. The muscles in her arms screamed. The bird wanted to roll right. She fought it back. Come on, come on. Behind her, Marines gritted through pain. One young corporal, pale and bleeding, tried to hold a pressure bandage on his friend's neck. The friend wasn't moving. The corporal's whisper reached her through the headset's open channel. "Don't die on me, Mason. Not here, not after she came for us." Rachel blinked hard, vision blurring for a second. She steadied herself. "Not here, not now." Halfway home, her radio buzzed again. "Angel Flight, this is Tower Control. You are ordered to divert to holding area Charlie. Repeat, divert." She cut them off mid-sentence. "Tower, you're in my airspace. Stand by for medical inbound." The tower fell silent. Back at base, medics were waiting again. She landed hot, rotor wash throwing sand into their faces. The Huey's tail drooped visibly, metal fatigue creeping in. She could smell oil burning. When the last Marine was offloaded, Rachel barely managed to kill the engine before slumping back in her seat. Alina was already running toward her. "You're bleeding through your stitches. You need a medic, Rachel." "No time." Her voice was raw, stripped of pretense. "How's the hydraulic system?" "Gone. You blew a main line. You can't take her back up." "I can bypass it, manual control." "That's suicide." Rachel looked at her, eyes steady despite the exhaustion. "Then I'll die with purpose." Alina's jaw clenched. "You don't even know if she'll start again." Rachel gave a small, tired smile. "Then I guess we'll find out." She started the sequence again. The Huey coughed, sputtered, but caught. The old turbine roared, the sound shaking loose rivets and courage alike. Alina leaned into the door, shouting over the noise. "What if they arrest you when you get back?" Rachel's eyes softened. "Then at least they'll have to look me in the eye when they do." As the Huey lifted again, Alina's voice cracked through tears. "Bring them home, Rachel." "I will." And she was gone again, swallowed by the orange dust of sunset. In the command center, the drone feed showed the same impossible sight, an ancient helicopter limping back into the valley, alone against the skyline. Someone whispered, "She's insane." Mitchell didn't reply. He was too busy staring at the pattern of her flight, every maneuver, every precision adjustment. He knew it now. He'd seen that before. The way she flew wasn't just trained, it was instinctive. Special operations instinct. "Sir," the intelligence officer said suddenly, "you might want to see this." He handed over a tablet. A file glowed on the screen. Classified, Shadow 71. Name LT, Rachel Thompson. Assignment, 160th SOAR Night Stalkers. Special Operations Aviation Regiment Candidate. Status, washed out 2019. Notes, unauthorized rescue mission. 32 Rangers saved, disciplinary discharge recommended. Mitchell exhaled slowly. "I knew it." "What does it mean, sir?" "It means the person everyone's been laughing at was once one of the best helicopter pilots on Earth." He turned to Bradford, whose face had gone pale. "Congratulations, Major. You've been insulting a night stalker." Bradford's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Mitchell leaned forward, voice low but cutting. "You called her weak. You sidelined her. You buried her in logistics because of politics. And now she's doing what none of us had the courage to do." The major looked like a man, realizing too late that his enemy had never been weakness. It was his own cowardice. Out in the canyon, Rachel's arms felt like stone. The hydraulic system had finally given out completely. Every movement of the cyclic required brute force. She gritted her teeth and used both hands, her shoulders screaming in protest. "Chaos 33, she gasped into the mic. "Inbound again, get your wounded ready." "Copy, Angel Flight," came the answer, thick with disbelief. "You're actually coming back, we thought." "You thought wrong." The sun had nearly set. The sky burned red over the mountains. The valley below looked like the mouth of something ancient and hungry. She saw movement, dozens of muzzle flashes along the ridges. The enemy knew she was coming now. They were waiting for her. "They'll aim higher this time." She dropped altitude, 20 feet above ground. Dirt and pebbles flew in her rotor wash. The world turned into a blur of motion and noise. Another RPG streaked from the ridge. She banked left hard. The missile missed by meters, detonating against the canyon wall. The shockwave tossed the Huey sideways. Rachel countered, arms trembling. Hold it, hold it. The second missile came from the opposite ridge. Too close, no room to maneuver. She dropped collective completely. The Huey fell. Wind roared. The canyon wall flashed past her window, so close she could have touched it. Then, at the last second, she pulled back on the cyclic with everything she had left. The helicopter leveled, skimming the canyon floor. Rocks shattered in her wake. The Marines below heard the rotors before they saw her. That sound, ancient, familiar, cut through chaos like a heartbeat returning after flatline. Angel Flight, we see you. Thompson's voice cracked. Ridge North still hot. Understood. She came in low, sliding through smoke, eyes locked on the landing zone. The Huey hit the dirt hard, more of a crash than a landing. Marines surged forward again, shouting over the din. Rachel could barely hear them anymore. Her world had shrunk to vibration, motion, pain. As they loaded the wounded, she noticed something strange, how quiet her own fear had become. It wasn't gone, just accepted, integrated. Fear was part of her now, moving through her veins with adrenaline and purpose. She caught a glimpse of the horizon, darkening sky, flares trailing smoke, the kind of beauty that feels wrong in the middle of war. It hit her then, how fragile this all was. One bullet, one mistake, one breath too slow. And yet she kept breathing. Load secure, someone yelled. Rachel didn't even nod. She just lifted, muscles screaming. The Huey staggered, groaned, but rose, barely. The radio crackled again. Angel Flight, this is chaos actual. Rachel blinked. That was a new voice. Calm, commanding. This is Angel Flight, she answered. Identify yourself, the voice said. Who authorized this extraction? No one, sir, she said softly. Sometimes the right thing doesn't need authorization. Silence then. Roger that, Angel Flight. What do you need from us? 30 seconds on the ground each run. Keep them off me for 30 seconds. You'll have it, the colonel said. Chaos out. She smiled faintly. Someone finally understood. Back at base, Mitchell watched her drag that dying helicopter through the canyon again. The room was silent now. No more laughter, no more arrogance. Just men and women realizing what they were witnessing. On the screen, the Huey shimmered in the fading light, patched and broken, yet somehow beautiful. A symbol, a defiance of everything that said she shouldn't be there. Bradford turned away, muttering, she'll never make it. Mitchell didn't take his eyes off the feed. She already has. That night, the desert bled into twilight. The valley glowed faintly with smoke and fire. The Huey's rotors reflected the last light as it dropped once more into the pit. Each descent felt heavier. Each takeoff cost more. But Rachel kept going, driven by something far stronger than survival. Because once you decide that other lives matter more than your own, every rule, every fear, every limitation becomes negotiable. And sometimes courage doesn't roar. It simply whispers. Again. What happens when the machine you trust with your life starts dying beneath you? And the only thing keeping it in the air is your will. By the time Rachel made her fourth run, the night had fallen. The desert had turned black and gold under tracer fire, the stars swallowed by smoke. Every mile of the valley was burning. Every breath felt borrowed. The Huey shook violently now, each vibration worse than the last. Warning lights glowed across the dash like a Christmas tree in hell. Hydraulic pressure gone, engine oil temperature high, transmission casing fractured. She flew anyway. Her wounded arm was numb. The bandage Alina had wrapped earlier was soaked through, blood seeping down to her glove. The cyclic fought her every second, heavy as iron. She flew by muscle, not training. The only reason the bird hadn't fallen from the sky was because she refused to let it. Her headset crackled. "Angel Flight, this is Chaos 33. We've got contact all around. You sure you can make another run?" Rachel's voice came calm. "Wasn't a question, Sergeant. Pop smoke." The Marines below heard her before they saw her. That deep, pulsing rhythm that doesn't sound like any other machine. It's something you feel in your ribs before it reaches your ears. The sound of a Huey. The sound of hope. She dropped fast through the canyon, 50 feet, then 30, then 20. Rocks screamed past the windows. Tracers lanced up like angry stars. The first RPG hit the canyon wall to her left, showering her cockpit with dust and shrapnel. The second missed by inches, passing so close the heat seared the paint. Rachel barely blinked. Fear was an old companion now. She had made peace with it. She flared hard and touched down in the middle of the perimeter. The Marines were running, carrying their brothers, bloodied, burned, barely conscious. Some of them still tried to fight, rifles firing between drags of wounded men. Every one of them had the same look when they reached her bird, disbelief. Like they couldn't believe someone actually came back. 30 seconds, Rachel yelled through the open door. "That's all I can give you." "Copy that, load fast." Her voice cracked, but her grip didn't. She watched the ground crew move with brutal efficiency. Men who'd accepted death hours ago, now moving like it could be delayed, if they just believed hard enough. She heard one of them shout, "That's Angel Flight, she came back again." A burst of machine gun fire ripped across the ridge. The Huey's fuselage rang like a gong. One bullet punched through the floor, inches from her foot. Another shattered a side window, spraying glass into her hair. She didn't move. 15 seconds, she shouted. The last Marine climbed aboard, blood pouring from his leg. Rachel yanked the collective. The Huey lurched upward, slow and heavy. An RPG exploded below, the blast wave slamming the helicopter sideways. She corrected instantly, arms shaking from the strain. "Chaos 33, we're airborne," she gasped. "Copy, Angel Flight, we see you. You're clear north." The old turbine screamed like a wounded animal, but it held. The Huey climbed, battered and defiant, blades carving through darkness. Rachel exhaled once, one long, steady breath. Then she smiled through the sweat. "Still with me, old girl? Good, let's get them home." In the command center, no one spoke. The only sound was the faint drone feed, grainy, shaky footage of the Huey lifting off through a storm of tracers. Bradford stared at the screen like he was watching a ghost. She's still flying," he said, almost to himself. Colonel Mitchell didn't answer. His eyes were locked on the monitor, jaw tight. The intelligence officer returned, pale, holding a folder. "Sir, I confirmed it. She's Shadow 71, first female candidate for the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment." Mitchell nodded slowly. "I knew it." Bradford swallowed hard. "That's impossible. She was a logistics pilot." "No, Major," Mitchell said quietly. "She was buried in logistics. There's a difference." He turned to the others in the room, his voice low but sharp. "You're watching a pilot who's done this before. Takar Gar, 2019. She flew into a kill zone when her team was written off, saved 32 Rangers. They blamed her for the political fallout and scrubbed her record." Bradford stammered, "She broke protocol." "She saved lives," Mitchell snapped. "You broke spirit." The Major's mouth closed. The Colonel leaned closer to the screen as the Huey began another descent into darkness. "Record everything," he said. "History's happening right now, and half of you fools tried to stop it." Rachel felt the controls stiffen again. Her arm was trembling, muscles spasming from exhaustion. She could barely keep the cyclic steady. Every second was a negotiation with gravity. Then the hydraulic system finally died, completely. The cyclic froze. For a terrifying instant, the Huey stopped responding. She knew what that meant. She studied the system since she was a kid, sitting beside her father in a civilian model. When the hydraulics failed, there was one desperate option: isolation valve. Manual control. No boost, no help, just steel cables and human strength. Rachel reached up and pulled the red-handled valve. The helicopter bucked violently as pressure bled out of the lines. The controls became impossibly heavy, but they moved, barely. Her arms screamed. Her shoulder felt like it was tearing apart. But the Huey lived again, raw, primitive, alive. "Manual control engaged," she whispered. "Okay, old girl, you and me." The Marines in the back had no idea. They were focused on keeping their wounded alive, on praying for the horizon to appear. But one of them, Staff Sergeant Thompson, crawled forward, his face slick with grime and sweat. "Ma'am, you're bleeding bad." Rachel glanced at him, eyes hollow but steady. "Still flying, aren't I?" He nodded slowly. "Yes, ma'am, and we're still breathing." They shared a look, a brief, silent understanding between warriors. Then the sergeant said softly, "You got balls of steel, ma'am." Rachel almost laughed, but the motion hurt. "I prefer titanium." The radio crackled. "Angel Flight, this is Chaos Actual. You're coming in low. Confirm your engine status." Rachel glanced at her gauges. "Failing, but not failed yet." "Copy that. Ground's pushing toward the east ridge. We'll hold till your next pass." "I'll be there," she said. And somehow she meant it. Back at base, Colonel Mitchell's voice carried across the command room like a sermon. "I want ground fire suppression from every unit within 10 kilometers. If she's putting her life on the line for those Marines, then by God, we're going to give her a chance." Someone started relaying orders. Bradford just stood there, staring at the screen, watching the helicopter limp across the mountains. "She can't keep that up," he muttered. "She'll kill herself." Mitchell didn't look at him. She already decided that was acceptable. The fifth run almost killed her. The engine temperature spiked into red, alarms shrieking. A sharp metallic pop echoed through the cabin. Something had cracked. The Huey shuddered violently, losing lift. Rachel's breathing quickened, but her mind stayed cold. When engines fail, you don't panic, you adapt. She reached down, adjusting the throttle, easing power while pulling back the collective just enough to maintain rotor RPM. "Come on, baby, just a little longer." The Huey sank faster than she liked. She saw the LZ approaching, small fires flickering in the dirt like candles marking graves. She'd been here too many times now. The Marines were fewer, their perimeter tighter, their eyes hollow but bright when they saw her lights cutting through smoke. "Angel Flight, we see you," Thompson shouted over the radio. "We're ready." Rachel didn't answer. She was too focused, too deep inside the machine. She flared hard and hit the ground. The impact jarred every bone in her body. But they were down, alive. "Load fast," she yelled. "Engine smoking," a Marine shouted. "I know, move faster." The men obeyed, adrenaline overriding exhaustion. 10, 12, maybe more clambered aboard, dragging bodies, passing ammo cans, shouting names. Rachel's vision was tunneling now, edges dark, center sharp. The Huey felt like an extension of her heartbeat. It pulsed when she did, it bled when she bled. She pulled pitch again. The rotor RPM dropped dangerously low. The helicopter staggered upward, slower than ever. Tracer fire followed them, carving green and red scars across the sky. But she didn't flinch. She was beyond fear now, beyond thought. "Chaos 33, this is Angel Flight," she said into the mic, voice barely a whisper. "We're on our way." "Copy, Angel Flight. God bless you, ma'am." She smiled faintly. "He already has, he gave me this bird." When she landed again at Leatherneck, The Huey was trailing smoke like a dying comet. Mechanics ran toward her, shouting warnings, waving hands. Rachel barely heard them. Her ears rang from hours of rotor noise. Her body was trembling from fatigue. As the last Marine was pulled off, she sat there in the cockpit, staring at her blood-stained hands on the controls. Alina climbed up to the door, tears streaming down her face. "You did it, you brought them home. 42 so far, 42. Rachel turned her head slowly. Her eyes were glassy but alive. "Not all, not yet. Rachel, look at you. Look at this bird, she's done." Rachel's gaze drifted to the cracked instrument panel, the faded labels, the bullet holes letting in slivers of light. "She's still breathing," she said quietly. "So am I." She looked out across the flight line, soldiers watching from a distance, silent, reverent. People who'd mocked her 2 hours ago now stood like witnesses at a sacred ceremony. And in the middle of it all, the Huey idled, rotor blades turning slow and steady, as if it refused to die before she was finished. Alina's voice broke. "Why are you doing this?" Rachel turned to her, her tone soft, almost a whisper. "Because someone has to remind them what the uniform means, what duty means, what it used to mean." Then she added, quieter still, "Because my father would have done the same." In the command center, Colonel Mitchell spoke without looking away from the screen. "Every soldier on this base owes that woman their silence while she works." Bradford swallowed hard. "Sir, regulations." Mitchell's stare cut him off. "Regulations will never inspire a man to climb into a burning helicopter for someone else's life. Courage will, and she's got enough for all of us." No one argued again. Rachel taxied forward, nose turning toward the dark horizon. The Huey's engine coughed, smoke curling from the exhaust. It was almost poetic, one dying thing carrying the dying to safety. She whispered to it like she had 100 times before. "Just one more, old girl, just one more." The tower didn't even try to stop her this time. As she lifted into the darkness, a silence fell over the base. Hundreds of eyes watched her rise, some in awe, some in guilt, some in prayer. Alina stood at the hangar door, hand over her mouth, tears streaking through grease. "Bring them home," she whispered again. The Huey disappeared into the black. Only the sound remained, the deep, rhythmic beat of blades fatting into the night. And in that sound lived something bigger than orders, bigger than rank. The sound of a single human being refusing to let others die forgotten. What does the edge of exhaustion feel like? Not tired, not drained. Just hollow. Like your soul has spent itself and all that's left is motion, instinct, duty. That's where Rachel was now. She didn't remember starting the 5th flight. One moment she was sitting in the cockpit, Alina's voice fatting behind her. The next she was in the air, the Huey trembling beneath her like it was praying too. The sky was black now, moonless. The valley below was a wound, still bleeding smoke and fire. Her gauges were nearly useless, half of them were shattered. Every sound the Huey made felt like a warning. Every vibration felt like a countdown. "Chaos 33, this is Angel Flight," she said into the static. "Inbound again, same approach." No one answered for a long moment. Then came a voice she didn't expect. "Angel Flight, this is Chaos Actual. Colonel Mitchell, we've been tracking you." Rachel blinked. "Sir, permission to." "Permission?" His voice carried a strange calm. "You already took it." For the first time that night, Rachel almost smiled. "I just need another 30 minutes, Colonel," she said. "You've got them," Mitchell replied. "Ground units are suppressing the ridge line. We'll keep it clean for you." "Copy that, Angel Flight out." She cut the radio, the less talking the better. She needed silence to listen, to the machine, to the rhythm, to the voice in her head that sounded too much like her father's. "Trust your instincts, Rach. The bird doesn't need control, it needs faith. The Huey dropped into the canyon again. Wind screamed past shattered windows. Smoke hung like fog, making everything surreal, dreamlike. The flames below looked almost beautiful, like the world was burning itself just to keep her warm. She saw the landing zone ahead. The Marines had flares out this time, guiding her in. Purple smoke still marked the center. And their movement, too much of it. They were surrounded again. Chaos 33, this is Angel Flight. You've got contact east and north. I count at least 20. Copy, we're low on ammo. We can't hold much longer. Hold anyway, Rachel said softly. I'm coming. She nosed the Huey down hard, dropping fast. The altimeter spun. The world turned into a tunnel of fire and noise. Bullets traced lines of green through the darkness. The ground rushed up to meet her. She flared, skid slamming into dirt, nose tilting forward before catching itself. The whole airframe groaned. She didn't care. She was down. Go, go, go. The Marines didn't need telling twice. They moved like ghosts through the smoke, carrying stretchers, hauling wounded, shouting names that the night would swallow whole. One of them stumbled near the cockpit, dragging a man missing half his leg. Rachel climbed out of her seat, half crawling, half running to help. The moment her boots hit the dirt, the sound hit her harder: machine guns, rockets, screams. The world was a storm of chaos and light. Get him in, she shouted, helping heave the wounded man aboard. Her shoulder screamed in pain, but she didn't stop. She looked up and saw Thompson firing from behind a half-buried truck, covering the last few men. Sergeant, she yelled, time to go. He turned, nodded once, then sprinted through dust and bullets, sliding into the Huey's bay as she climbed back into the cockpit. Everyone's aboard, he shouted. Let's move. Rachel pulled pitch. The Huey lifted sluggishly, shaking violently. Then a streak of light shot from the ridge, RPG. She banked right hard, but the explosion caught the tail. The blast threw the helicopter sideways. The world spun, sky ground, smoke, sky again. Rachel's head slammed into the canopy. Pain burst behind her eyes. Warning lights screamed. The tail rotor was gone. She fought the spin with everything she had, muscle and memory and sheer will. The Huey began a slow, spiraling climb, each rotation closer to chaos. Her vision blurred from blood and dizziness. Hold on, she shouted into the mic. Are we going down? Thompson yelled from the back. Not tonight. She feathered the throttle, used collective like a scalpel, coaxing balance where none should exist. The Huey steadied barely, wobbling like a drunk but still flying. Her hands trembled. Her arm was dead weight. She flew one-handed, guiding by feel more than sight. Each second stretched forever. They broke free of the canyon at last, open air, stars above. Rachel gasped, realizing she'd been holding her breath for minutes. We're clear, she whispered. Cheers erupted in the back, but they were weak, the kind that sound more like relief than celebration. She could hear sobbing, could smell blood. That, more than anything, reminded her why she couldn't stop. She keyed the radio. Angel Flight to base, coming in hot. I need medical teams ready. Copy, Angel Flight, Mitchell's voice said softly. You're cleared, all pads. Copy. She glanced at her controls. Oil pressure 0, transmission heat red. The Huey was dying under her hands. But it wasn't dead yet. At the base, floodlights turned night into blinding white. Medics lined the pad, stretchers ready. Mitchell stood among them, headset pressed to his ear. She's coming in low, an operator said. No tail rotor, she's spinning. Tell the crews to clear the pad, Mitchell barked. Give her room. The Huey appeared out of the darkness, limping, twisting slightly, but steadying itself like a wounded bird that refused to crash. Rachel flared at the last second. The skids hit hard, bounced, then slammed down again. Metal screamed. Smoke poured from the exhaust. But they were on the ground. She killed the throttle and ripped off her helmet. Her hair was plastered to her face, blood on her cheek, breath ragged. Medics swarmed the helicopter, pulling Marines out. Rachel climbed out last, boots hitting the tarmac like lead. The world tilted. She almost fell. Someone caught her, Colonel Mitchell himself. He looked at her like he was seeing something holy. "You're Shadow 71, aren't you?" he said quietly. Rachel met his eyes, barely able to focus. "That's an old name, sir." "Not old enough to forget," he said. "You've done enough, you're grounded." Rachel shook her head weakly. "Not yet." Mitchell frowned. "You can't even stand." "Doesn't matter." She looked past him toward the hospital tents. "There are still men out there." He stared at her for a long moment. Then he said quietly, "You've done the impossible 3 times over." Rachel's voice was a whisper. "Then once more won't hurt." She turned back toward the helicopter. Alina met her halfway, tears mixing with grease on her face. "Rachel, please." The engines cracked, the transmissions bleeding out. "Patch it," Rachel said. "There's nothing left to patch." Rachel looked at her with that steady, unshakable calm, the same look she used to give green pilots before takeoff. "Then pray." Alina's lip trembled. "Why, Rachel, why keep doing this?" Rachel looked at the burning horizon. "Because someone's still waiting." Colonel Mitchell watched her climb back into the cockpit, disbelief and admiration warring on his face. "Is she out of her mind?" someone muttered behind him. Mitchell didn't answer. He just said quietly, "No, she's out of excuses." The Huey roared to life again. The turbine howled, shaking everything nearby. Mechanics covered their ears. Sparks flew from the exhaust. And still she lifted. No one ordered her to stop this time. The tower didn't interfere. The airfield just watched. Like a congregation watching their last prayer take flight. As she rose into the black sky, the comms filled with voices, soldiers, medics, techs, all saying the same thing. "Godspeed, Angel Flight." Rachel said nothing back. She just banked north toward the smoke. The 6th run was the worst. Half the Marines were gone now, either evacuated or beyond saving. The remaining few were dug in near a burned-out APC, using its twisted hull for cover. Tracer fire still swept across the canyon like rain. She approached silently, lights off, flying dark. She could see them now, tiny flashes in the dirt, men firing back with what little they had left. She could almost hear their screams even over the engine's roar. "Chaos 33, this is Angel Flight. Pop smoke, I'm coming in low." No response, just static. "Chaos 33, do you copy?" "Nothing." Rachel's stomach turned cold. She pushed the Huey lower, skimming the canyon floor. "Come on, Sergeant, talk to me." Then a faint whisper. "Angel Flight, we're here, east side, heavy contact." "Copy, hold tight." She saw movement, figures dragging someone through the dirt. Purple smoke finally bloomed, faint, almost gone. She dropped fast, rotor wash scattering dust and shell casings. The LZ was chaos, bodies, fire, gunfire everywhere. The Huey hit the ground, tilting slightly to one side. Marines ran forward, half limping, half crawling. Rachel leaned out, waving them in. "Get them in, go." Bullets pinged off the fuselage. One tore through her side window, grazing her cheek. She didn't flinch. Didn't even blink. One Marine fell 10 feet from the ramp, shot through the chest. Rachel jumped down, sprinted across open ground, grabbed his vest and dragged him herself. Her shoulders screamed, her legs burned. But she got him inside. "Go, go, go." Thompson appeared again, face bloody, uniform torn. He climbed in last, dragging another Marine with him. "Everyone's in," he shouted. "Let's get the hell out." Rachel jumped back into the cockpit, slammed the throttle forward. The Huey roared, blades clawing at the air. They rose slowly, bullets trailing after them like angry fireflies. As they cleared the ridge, Thompson grabbed the side rail and shouted over the noise, "You're out of your damn mind, ma'am." Rachel managed a weak grin. "Been told that before." He laughed a short, broken laugh. "You're something else." The radio came alive again. "Angel Flight, this is Chaos Actual. Confirm you're airborne." Rachel's voice cracked. "Last load aboard, coming home." "Copy that, Angel Flight. You did it." She exhaled slowly. "Not yet." She looked back once, just once, at the burning valley below. It looked smaller now, quieter. Like the earth itself had exhaled too. By the time she reached the base, the Huey was done. The engine coughed and sputtered. Smoke trailed in thick black ribbons. Warning lights blinked weakly, like dying stars. She barely made it to the pad before the main rotor slowed on its own, losing power. The skids hit the ground harder than ever. The turbine screamed, coughed once, then fell silent. Rachel sat there for a moment, staring straight ahead. No sound, no movement, just her heartbeat. Then slowly, she reached up and shut down the last switch. The cockpit went dark. Outside, medics ran forward again, but she didn't move. Colonel Mitchell reached the door first, staring at the wrecked machine and at the woman inside. She was still gripping the controls. "Lieutenant Thompson," he said quietly, "it's over." Rachel looked at him, eyes unfocused but steady. "Not yet, sir." He frowned. "There's no one left to save." Rachel exhaled. "Then maybe it's time to save ourselves." Her words hung in the air like smoke, soft, haunting, true. When the last Marine was rolled into the hospital tent, someone said it out loud. 340 survivors. Silence followed, the kind of silence that carries awe and disbelief in equal measure. Alina stood at the edge of the pad, watching Rachel sit in the Huey's open door. Blood down her sleeve, dirt on her face, but her eyes still alive. "You did it," Alina whispered. Rachel didn't look up. "We did it." Then softer, "But the cost, that's the part they'll never write about." She looked out toward the horizon, where the valley burned faintly in the distance. And in her silence, the moral lived unspoken but clear. Because sometimes dignity doesn't shout. It doesn't march or beg or wait for orders. Sometimes dignity just flies. Bleeding, breaking. But never, ever turning back. What happens after the noise stops? After the screaming engines, the tracer fire, the chaos. When all that's left is the hum of the fluorescent lights above a military infirmary. And the echo of things you can't forget. Rachel opened her eyes to white light. For a second, she thought she was back in the cockpit, that the sharp beep of her heart monitor was another warning tone, that the hiss of oxygen was just engine bleed. But then the smell hit her. Antiseptic, metal, burnt fabric. Hospital. Her body felt heavy, too heavy. Bandages wrapped her left arm, chest, and shoulder. IV lines trailed like puppet strings from her hand. She turned her head. Alina sat nearby, asleep in a chair, still wearing the same oil-stained uniform. Her face was pale, her hands raw from wrench work. Rachel tried to speak, but her throat burned. The first sound that came out wasn't a word, it was a rasp, half air, half ache. Alina stirred instantly. "Rachel." Her voice cracked on the name. Rachel blinked slowly. "How long?" 22 hours, Alina said. "You were unconscious, lost a lot of blood." Rachel's eyes drifted to the corner of the room. Her flight suit lay folded on a table, torn, scorched, streaked with red. Next to it sat a small metal tag, bent and charred, the Huey's identification plate. "Where's the bird?" Rachel asked softly. Alina hesitated. They're cutting her apart right now. Command ordered it, said she's done. Rachel's jaw tightened. She deserved better. I told them that, Alina whispered. Didn't change anything. Silence filled the space between them, heavy, unspoken, sacred. Then Alina said, the colonel been here 3 times, said he'll come back when you wake up. Rachel nodded faintly, eyes distant. And Bradford? Alina's face darkened. Transferred, effective immediately. Rumor is the colonel made sure of it. Rachel closed her eyes again. Good. Her voice was barely a whisper. What about the Marines? 340. Every one of them accounted for. You pulled out the last group right before that final blast leveled the canyon. If you'd been 30 seconds later. Rachel's breath hitched. She didn't need her to finish. They're calling it a miracle, Alina said softly. Rachel stared at the ceiling, her voice empty. Miracles cost. Outside the hospital, the base was different now. The same soldiers who'd once laughed at the logistics pilot now stood when her name was spoken. Mechanics left small offerings near the wrecked Huey, patches, photos, dog tags. Someone had painted 3 words on the hangar wall in black soot. Angel Flight Lives. The air smelled like diesel and reverence. The kind of silence that only comes after you've seen something that changes you. Colonel Mitchell stood outside Rachel's room, arms crossed, face unreadable. When he finally entered, his boots clicked softly against the tile. Rachel didn't turn her head. Sir. How's the arm? He asked. She flexed her fingers weakly, still attached. Good, he said, pulling up a chair. I'd hate to lose the only pilot who can fly without hydraulics. Rachel managed a small smirk. I don't recommend it. He studied her for a long time. You know what happens next? She nodded faintly. Inquiry. He leaned back, sighing. They'll call it an unauthorized operation. They'll want to know why you disobeyed orders, why you risked government property, why you flew a non-combat helicopter into an active war zone. Rachel's gaze stayed on the ceiling, because no one else did. He nodded slowly. I know, but they don't ask why for understanding. They ask it to assign blame. She looked at him finally. And what will you tell them? Mitchell held her eyes. That I watched a pilot do something no manual, no protocol, and no man in this room had the courage to attempt. Her throat tightened. They'll still bury it. He nodded. Maybe, but not forever. Stories like yours have a way of finding air. Rachel looked away. I didn't do it for a story. I know, Mitchell said quietly. That's why it's worth telling. He stood, hands in pockets. They'll debrief you tomorrow. Don't let them turn your courage into paperwork. Rachel gave a faint, dry laugh. Never been good at paperwork. He smiled faintly. Good, stay that way. As he turned to leave, she said, Sir. He looked back. She hesitated, then said softly, Thank you for not stopping me. Mitchell's expression softened. I knew better than to try. He left without another word. Rachel stared after him for a long time, not at the man, but at the doorway he'd left open. It felt like a threshold, the kind that separates the people who act from the ones who talk about acting. That night the base went quiet. Rachel lay awake, the room dim except for the soft pulse of the monitor beside her. Her body was still, her mind was. Every sound brought back something, a rotor echo, a scream, a voice on the radio. She closed her eyes, and for a moment she was back in the canyon. The wind, the smoke, the faces of the men she'd carried. And then her father's voice. There are moments, Rach, when flying isn't about skill, it's about choice, when the world asks what you'll risk for someone else's life. She exhaled. Guess I answered that one. Tears slipped down her cheek. Quiet, uninvited, but human. The inquiry came 2 days later. A sterile room. 3 officers behind a desk, paperwork stacked neatly. Rachel sat across from them, in a sling and hospital fatigues. Her hair was tied back, her eyes steady. The senior officer, a brigadier general, adjusted his glasses. "Lieutenant Thompson, do you understand the purpose of this hearing?" "Yes, sir." "You are aware that you conducted an unauthorized combat rescue operation without clearance, disobeying direct command orders from Major Bradford?" "Yes, sir." "And that you risked military equipment valued at $4.6 million in a non-sanctioned engagement zone?" Rachel's tone didn't change. "The equipment was already deadlined, sir. Value was theoretical." The general's jaw flexed. "You understand you could face court-martial?" "I do." He studied her. "Then tell us, Lieutenant, why?" Rachel's gaze didn't waver. "Because they were still alive." The room went silent. The general cleared his throat. "You believed command had made a mistake?" "No, sir," she said softly. "Command made a decision. I made a different one." The other officer, a woman, leaned forward. "Do you consider yourself above orders, Lieutenant?" Rachel shook her head. "No, ma'am. I consider myself responsible for the meaning of them." The general stared at her for a long time, then closed the file. "You disobeyed the chain of command, but you also saved 340 American lives." He leaned back. "That's not something we can ignore or fully reward." Rachel nodded once. "I didn't ask for reward." "No," the general said quietly, "you didn't." He looked down at the papers again, then slid one aside. "This board recommends administrative review, not prosecution. Effective immediately, you are relieved of active flight duty pending further evaluation." Rachel's jaw tightened, but she didn't speak. "Dismissed," the general said softly, "and Lieutenant." She looked up. He hesitated. "Don't let the people who never bled tell you what it means to serve." Rachel gave the faintest nod. "Yes, sir." Outside the tent, sunlight hit her face. It felt strange after so much darkness. The air smelled of dust and fuel. In the distance, she could hear a helicopter taking off, not hers, but the sound still made something in her chest ache. Alina waited near the jeep. "Well." Rachel shrugged. "They let me keep my name, that's enough." Alina managed a tired smile. "They can ground you, but they can't erase you." Rachel looked past her, toward the far edge of the airfield. Mechanics were still cutting apart the Huey. Its fuselage gleamed dull silver in the sun, panels peeled open like old scars. She walked closer, slow, each step deliberate. A young mechanic stopped what he was doing and saluted. "Ma'am." Rachel nodded. "Carry on." Her fingers brushed the tail section. The metal was warm. She whispered, "You did good, old girl. You did better than any of us." The mechanic looked away, pretending not to hear. Alina stood back, watching her. "You're gonna miss her." Rachel smiled faintly. "I already do." She turned then, looking at the horizon, the endless stretch of desert she'd crossed again and again. It looked peaceful now, too peaceful. Almost like it had never happened. But she knew better. The desert remembers. That evening, as the sun sank behind the mountains, Rachel stood alone on the flight line. A faint wind stirred the sand. Far off, the last medevac of the night rose into the sky, blades flashing gold in the dying light. The sound faded slowly, leaving only silence. Rachel closed her eyes. In that silence lived every scream she'd silenced, every man she'd carried, every second she'd borrowed from death. It wasn't pride she felt, not even relief. It was something quieter, something harder to define. Grace, maybe. Or acceptance. Sometimes you don't get to choose what breaks you, she thought. You only choose what it breaks for. She turned away from the horizon at last. Somewhere inside the hangar, the walls still bore the soot-darkened words, "Angel Flight Lives." And maybe that was enough. What do you do when the war ends? But it doesn't end inside you. For Rachel, silence became its own battlefield. 3 weeks had passed since the inquiry. The desert base had gone back to its rhythm, aircraft humming, boots on sand, orders given, orders followed. The world had moved on. But she hadn't. Her quarters were small, bare. A cot, a desk, a duffel half-packed. Her flight patch lay folded beside her helmet, the name Thompson barely visible under the grime. Every night she told herself she sleep. Every night she lied. Sleep didn't come. Only echoes did, rotor beats turning into heartbeats, gunfire fatting into whispers. She'd close her eyes and still feel the cyclic in her hand, the weight of it, the resistance of a dying bird refusing to quit. She missed that resistance more than she'd admit. On her table sat a letter, the official discharge notice, unsigned. She'd been given extended leave pending reassignment. It sounded like mercy. It was. It was a quiet exile wrapped in paperwork. Outside, voices called cadence in the dark. Life went on without her. And that somehow hurt most of all. The door knocked once. Rachel didn't answer. It opened anyway. Alina stepped in, carrying a thermos and 2 metal cups. "You're still up," she said softly. Rachel gave a humorless smile, apparently. Alina poured coffee, sat across from her. "You've been grounded for 2 weeks. You haven't said a word about it." Rachel's gaze stayed on the patch on the table. Nothing to say. Alina studied her. "That's not true." Rachel sighed. "You ever fix something so broken you stopped believing it would work, and then when it finally did, you realized you didn't know what to do without it?" Alina smiled sadly. "You're talking about the Huey." Rachel looked up. "No, I'm talking about purpose." The room went quiet. Then Alina said softly, "You gave 340 men a second chance. That's not nothing." Rachel's voice cracked. "Then why does it feel like nothing now?" Alina didn't answer. She just poured more coffee, slid the cup forward. "Because you're still in the middle of it," she said finally. "The rest of us got to stop. You didn't." Rachel stared into the dark liquid. "You think that ever stops?" Alina's eyes softened. "No, but it changes." Rachel nodded, but her gaze was distant. "I don't even remember their faces, just voices, fragments." Alina hesitated. "One of them's here." Rachel looked up. "What?" "He came in this morning, said he owed you something." The medical wing smelled of bleach and burnt coffee. Rachel walked slowly, the bandage under her sleeve tight, every step reminding her what she'd left in that canyon. She stopped outside room 14. A young Marine sat inside, 20, maybe 21, pale, his right leg gone from mid-thigh down. He was staring out the window when she entered. He turned surprised. Then he smiled. "You're her." Rachel frowned slightly. "Her." "The pilot, Angel Flight." Rachel shifted uncomfortably. "That's not what I called myself." "Doesn't matter," he said. "That's what we call you." She tried to find words. "You shouldn't be up." "I shouldn't be alive," he said simply, "but here I am." They stood in silence for a moment, the air heavy with things neither could say. Then he said, "They told us you came back 5 times. 6, Rachel corrected softly. "One didn't make it to the report." He nodded slowly as if that made perfect sense. "You know, when we saw that chopper come through the smoke, it didn't look real. Thought maybe we were hallucinating." Rachel smiled faintly. "You were." He looked down, voice trembling. "My brother was with me. He didn't make it, but you still came back for us. I just—" His voice broke. Rachel stepped closer. "You don't owe me anything, son." He shook his head. "I just wanted to say thank you." She didn't know how to respond to that. Gratitude always felt heavier than bullets. Finally she said quietly, "Then do something with it." He frowned. "What do you mean?" "Live, that's how you say thank you." He nodded, eyes glistening. "Yes, ma'am." She turned to leave. But as she reached the door, his voice stopped her. "Ma'am, I thought you should know. We named our squad's call sign after you." Rachel froze. "What?" "Angel Flight 33. It's gonna be our unit tag from now on." She didn't turn around, she couldn't. Her throat had already closed up. She just nodded once and walked out. Outside, the desert wind met her again. It carried that faint, dry scent dust, jet fuel memory. The kind of smell that clings to you long after you've left the war behind. She walked toward the hangar without meaning to. The one where the Huey had been. Now all that was left was a skeleton frame, stripped of panels, rotors gone, tail cut away. But the seat was still there. Rachel climbed inside and sat down, hands resting on the ghost of the cyclic. Her fingers found grooves in the metal where her gloves had worn the paint away. She closed her eyes, and for just a moment the sound came back, faint, imagined but perfect. Whump whump whump. The heartbeat of something that refused to die. She smiled, tears tracing the dirt on her cheeks. "Rest now," she whispered. "You earned it." That night, Colonel Mitchell found her sitting on the flight line again. He didn't speak at first, just stood beside her watching the sky. "Word came down from command," he said finally. "You're cleared for return to stateside duty, non-flying position, advisory work." Rachel didn't look up. "Paperwork." "Mostly." She smiled faintly. "Figures." He hesitated. "They're calling what you did the Corette extraction. It's already circulating through channels. Classified, but stories have a way of leaking." Rachel's voice was soft. "I didn't do it for a headline." "I know," Mitchell said. "That's why it's a good story." They stood in silence for a while. Then Mitchell said, "You ever think about why you really did it? Not the orders, not the logic, the real reason." Rachel was quiet a long time. "When you're in the air," she said finally, "you can feel who still needs saving. It's not rational. It's like gravity, you just fall toward them." Mitchell nodded. "That's as good a reason as any." He reached into his pocket, pulled out something wrapped in cloth, and handed it to her. She unfolded it. The Huey's ID plate, the same one Alina had kept by her bedside. Mitchell had cleaned it, polished the edges, even engraved new words along the bottom. "Angel Flight 71, she brought THEM home." Rachel stared at it, the metal catching the faint moonlight. Her throat tightened. "You didn't have to do this." "I know," he said, "but someone should have a long time ago." She looked at him, eyes glistening. "What happens to her?" "The frame," he smiled. "I ordered it shipped home. She'll sit in a museum one day. And when they ask how an obsolete bird flew through hell 6 times, I'll tell them, the helicopter didn't do it. The pilot did." Rachel looked back down at the plate. She'd like that. 2 days later, her transfer orders arrived. She packed quietly, no ceremony, no send-off. Just folded uniforms, a few photos, a bent dog tag and the plate. Alina drove her to the airstrip. Neither spoke much. When they reached the tarmac, the morning light was soft, pale, almost kind. As Rachel climbed out, Alina grabbed her wrist. "What are you gonna do now?" she asked. Rachel looked toward the horizon, that endless gold line where the sky met sand. "I don't know," she said. "Maybe teach people how to fly without orders." Alina smiled through tears. "The world could use more of that." Rachel laughed softly. "Yeah, maybe it could." They hugged tight, wordless final. Then Rachel turned and walked toward the transport plane. Halfway up the ramp she stopped, looked back. Alina stood alone in the wind, hand raised in salute. Rachel raised hers too, then disappeared inside. The engine started, roaring like an echo of the past. Dust swirled, the plane lifted, and the base grew smaller until it vanished. Thousands of miles away, the world looked different. Green, quiet, civilized. Rachel's flight jacket still smelled faintly of sand and jet fuel. People on the street passed her without knowing, without guessing who she was or what she'd done. And maybe that was okay, because she didn't need them to know. She sat one evening in a small park near the airfield, a place where jets still passed overhead every few minutes. The sound was different from the Hueys, but close enough that she could still pretend. An older man feeding birds nearby glanced at her arm, the faint scar beneath her sleeve, and said, "Pilot." Rachel smiled faintly. "Used to be." He nodded. "Used to be is still enough." She chuckled softly. "Maybe." The man tossed bread to the pigeons, then said, "You ever miss it?" She looked at the sky, where contrails crossed like memories. "Every day." He smiled knowingly. "Then you're still flying, just not with engines anymore." Rachel looked at him, a stranger, maybe a veteran, maybe just someone who understood. And for the first time since the desert, she didn't feel alone. She exhaled long and slow and whispered to herself, "It's never really over, it just changes shape." The wind shifted. The sound of a distant helicopter carried across the horizon, faint, rhythmic, familiar. Rachel closed her eyes. And somewhere between memory and silence, she smiled. Because she knew. What she'd done didn't belong to the war anymore. It belonged to the people who'd lived because of it. What does legacy sound like? Not the roar of engines. Not the applause of men. Sometimes it's the silence that comes after. When the world moves on, but a single name keeps whispering in the spaces between memory and duty. Years passed. The war ended. New ones began. Different desert, same mistakes. And somewhere between them all, Rachel Thompson disappeared from the headlines she never asked for. The reports called her lieutenant, then veteran, then nothing at all. The kind of story that becomes a rumor, something passed between soldiers in bars and barracks. You hear about that woman pilot, the one who flew into hell 6 times. Yeah, they say she saved 340 men. They say she never flew again. The truth, as always, was quieter. Rachel settled in a small town near the coast, far from sand, far from sound. The kind of place where morning smelled like salt and rain, instead of dust and cordite. She bought a rundown house with peeling paint and a wide porch that faced the sea. And for the first time in her life, there was nothing left to chase. No missions, no orders, no noise. Just the sound of waves, steady, patient, endless. She taught flying again, but only to a few. Young pilots from the local airfield, wide-eyed and eager, who came to her with trembling hands and dreams too big for the world. They didn't know who she was, not really. To them, she was just Miss Thompson, the quiet instructor with the steady voice and the faint limp. She never corrected them. Names didn't matter anymore. What mattered was passing on what flying had taught her. Not how to move a machine, but how to understand it. How to listen, how to feel. Anyone can fly when the sky's calm, she used to tell them. But the real test comes when the world tries to take that sky away from you. Most of them didn't understand what she meant. A few did. And those few, the ones who stayed late, who flew in the rain, who listened more than they spoke, they carried her lessons into the air like prayer. One winter morning, the mail arrived late. Among the bills and grocery ads sat an envelope marked with a military seal. Rachel turned it over in her hands, thumb brushing the edge. Old habit made her check the postmark, Washington, D.C. No sender listed. She opened it slowly. Inside was a folded letter and a single photograph. The photo showed a group of men, Marines, standing in front of a new helicopter. Their unit insignia read, Angel Flight 33. In the middle stood a young captain with short hair and a prosthetic leg. He was smiling. The caption on the back said, "Still flying because you did." The letter was short. Ma'am, we never got to say this properly. You didn't just save us that day. You taught us what service means. We carry it still in every flight, every mission, every name on the roll call. We thought you should know that Angel Flight 33 is real now. A new generation. Your story became our standard. Semper Fi, ma'am. See you in the sky. Sergeant David Thompson, no relation, Corps Ed survivor. Rachel read it twice, then folded it carefully and placed it beside the photograph on her table. Her hand trembled slightly. Not from pain. From memory. She went outside, the sea wind cool against her face. The horizon was wide, endless and impossibly quiet. She sat on the porch steps and watched the waves roll in, each one breaking and returning, breaking and returning. A rhythm that never stopped. Like rotors. Like a heartbeat. She whispered, still flying. Later that year, a ceremony was held in Washington. The museum stood polished and quiet, the kind of place where history is sealed behind glass. A small exhibit had been added, one most visitors passed by without knowing. A weathered flight suit. A cracked helmet. A piece of green fuselage, with bullet holes still visible. And beneath it, a simple brass plaque. LT Rachel Thompson, Shadow 71. Pilot 160th SOAR, attached Marine Operations. Defied orders, saved 340 lives. Corps Ed Extraction, 2025. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. People stop there sometimes, not because of the name, but because of the silence the display carried. The kind of silence that feels alive, like it's still watching, still listening, still reminding. One day, a group of young cadets visited the exhibit. Their instructor, a gray-haired colonel, stood before the display. "Anyone know who she was?" he asked. A few shook their heads. One girl raised her hand. She was a pilot, right, from the old operations. The colonel smiled faintly. Pilot, yes, but more than that. He looked at the plaque. She was proof that orders mean nothing if you've lost the reason you follow them. The cadets listened quietly. He continued, "They say she flew 6 times into an active kill zone in a dying helicopter, without hydraulics, without authorization, to bring home men who'd already been written off." One cadet frowned. "Why would she do that, sir?" The colonel looked at him. "Because sometimes the right thing doesn't wait for permission." He turned back to the display, voice softer. "And because courage doesn't always survive the war, but hers did." The cadet stood silent for a moment longer. Then one whispered, almost to himself, "Angel Flight." The colonel nodded, "That's right." They moved on, but the echo stayed behind. Years later, long after most who'd served in Corps Ed had aged and retired, a reunion was held at a small airbase in Arizona. The hangar was filled with photographs, laughter, and ghosts. Someone had restored an old A1 Huey, green paint, polished skids, blades still strong. It wasn't hers, but close enough. When they started it up, the sound filled the desert, deep, rhythmic, timeless. Men stopped talking. Some smiled. Some cried. Sergeant David Thompson, now older, slower, steadier, stood by the aircraft's nose and placed his hand on the metal. "She'd have liked this," he said quietly. Beside him, a young pilot asked, "Did you ever meet her again?" He smiled sadly. "No, but I didn't need to. Every time I fly, she's there." He looked up at the spinning blades. "Some people serve once, she served forever." The pilot nodded. Neither spoke again until the Huey's rotors slowed and the sound faded into wind. And in that silence, that pure desert silence, it felt like she was there. Not as a ghost, not as a legend. Just as a presence. The quiet kind that never asks for attention, but earns it anyway. Back on the coast, the sea rolled on. Rachel's porch sat empty now. the house weathered but standing. Inside, the photograph of Angel Flight 33 still rested beside the letter. Next to them, the metal plate polished, engraved, catching light whenever the sun came through the window. Every few months, a helicopter from the nearby base would pass low over the coastline. Locals would glance up, hear the thump of rotors, and for a second think it was thunder. But those who knew, the few who remembered, would smile faintly, because they recognized that sound. It wasn't just noise. It was memory. It was legacy. It was her. And maybe that was all legacy ever is. Not statues or medals or pages in a book, but the invisible wake left behind by those who refused to give up when giving up was easier. In the last page of her personal journal, found years later by a museum archivist, she had written one final line. The ink was shaky but sure. The truth is simple. I was never the hero. The machine was never the miracle. The miracle was that courage still existed at all, hidden in the quiet hearts of people who do the right thing when no one's watching. Below it, she'd drawn a small, uneven sketch. A helicopter, crude but recognizable. Beside it, 3 words in careful handwriting. Angel Flight Lives. So when people ask about Rachel Thompson, about the pilot who defied orders, about the woman who pulled men out of hell, they never tell the story the same way twice. And maybe that's how it should be. Because her story doesn't belong to one voice or one battle. It belongs to every soldier who's ever looked at the impossible and gone anyway. Her name lives quietly, in the sound of rotors, in the calm before the storm, in the memory of a choice made not for glory, but for grace. And maybe that's the closest thing to immortality anyone ever earns. Because sometimes, dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. And when it does, the whole world listens.